The recent March 2023 ban list just dropped, and to some surprise it only contained one card, BT11's Greymon X. While this was on the prediction list of many players, both myself and others were shocked to not see him joined by the likes of Coolboy or permanent bannings of OTK enablers like Okulamon or Wergarurumon. Between this decision and the recent Ultimate Cup rulings, it's fair to say the way Bandai engages with bannings isn't the most healthy for the Digimon card game. But before we get too far away from it, let's really take a look at Greymon X, which I feel is probably the safest ban right now, and a good microcosm of a card that should be banned and why it should be banned. Of the multiple Jenga pieces one could pull from Black War Greymon, Greymon X serves a dual purpose. Firstly, Greymon X was 100% a pushed card, serving as an archetypal Deltamon effect, which has had its own interactions with Shine Greymon and BT12, reducing the cost of Rise Greymon, and simultaneously gets a new piece in Raid Metal Greymon. This is also before we even see the contents of the incoming starter deck Dragon of Courage, which will likely contain a new Metal Greymon, and going by how starter decks in the past have worked, should be a quality card and a meta contender. Add on to all of this the natural power of the X antibody mechanic, and specifically Greymon X is going to be interacting with some of the best champions in the game, including the Security Attack +1 Greymon, the Buff and Reducing Greymon, and the Greymon in BT12 that is just going to play a Tamer for free. You have a problem where there's too much value off of a singular card that's also simultaneously bridging the color gaps, reducing your level 5, and, in addition to everything else, offering a protection clause. Now, while this protection clause is in some ways more limited than the other Greymon X from BT9, the fact that it's there at all is just kind of icing on the cake in this scenario. It didn't need a protection clause, it already had a powerful effect on reduction, and just in the fact that it is an X antibody card. And as discussed previously, it needs to be viewed in the context of the decks it interacts with. This includes War Greymon and BT12, Black War Greymon X currently and in the future, and at this point really any Greymon-oriented deck. It could have applications in Omnimon Turbo, it could have applications when the starter decks come out. We're looking at an archetype that is in more or less a position of being the Charizard of the Digimon card game. So in that case, it's going to be a support piece that's going to be constantly reoccurring. If this ban is preemptive, fine, but it's not like it isn't going to be a problem down the road, or more so of a problem that it might have already been. But more so than any of this, in a world where Coolboy gets to live, Greymon X needs to take the hit. And while this topic has been beaten to death, Coolboy is just not a healthy card. It's kind of the antithesis of everything that is Tamer design in the Digimon card game. Tamers are set to provide memory back to you, they're set to provide advantage like card draw, like with Davis. They also exist to just outright draw you cards. Coolboy does all of these things for 2 memory. At half the cost of a Davis, it can fetch you 2 cards. It can serve as an advantage engine later. And just in the fact that it is 2 memory, it allows for great first turn plays. Refilling your hand, putting your opponent to 2, putting them in an unfavorable position, potentially allowing them to swing you over to 3 memory. And it's just not good considering how the X antibody archetype it primarily interacts with is already powerful. Alphamon was enough of a problem over the course of BT9 to where it had to see absolute nerfs in killing the Door Greymon that effectively at the time allowed the deck to function. But Coolboy has persisted because the other decks that currently use the X antibody forms are just that good, and X antibody's mechanic is good. You are filtering away a free card, you are gaining essentially an additional effect on top of the already existing Digimon. Whether that's an Agumon X allowing you to surge on top of your BT5 Agumon and potentially plus up to 4 cards, whether that's a Greymon X offering protection, whether that's a Wergarurumon X facilitating a jamming OTK engine, X antibody is already good enough. It does not need a support piece to make it more powerful. Now, one of the arguments I've heard back is that, well, if you axe Coolboy or potentially even get rid of it fully, you're looking at a point where X antibody gets nerfed because they could make future X antibody cards. If you look at the card game in relation to the source material as it exists, realistically, the only X antibody forms we're missing are in the level 6 slot. The remaining Royal Knights like Dynasmon X, Contorsmon X, or Lord Nightmon X, or the 7 Great Demon Lords that we haven't gotten X antibody forms for, or even their base cards like Leviamon or Barbamon. In situations like that, you aren't really utilizing Coolboy because you're not going to play him for an X antibody form that's going at the very top of your curve. If you look at the decks with full X antibody lines going all the way from Rookie to Mega, you look at Greymon, both Black and War Greymon, you look at Garurumon, you look at Doramon up through Alphamon, and finally Beelzemon. While there are a few other outliers with multiple X antibodies, like Leomon for example, those 4 are the most relevant competitive decks, and some of the marquee archetypes Bandai is pushing. Firstly, Beelzemon just outright doesn't use Cool Boy. It already has enough value from trashing. Doramon and Alphamon benefits from Cool Boy, but also has archetype tamers that already exist and is probably likely to get more in the future. Garurumon, while it does not have a mat to equate to the BT12 tie, I wouldn't be surprised if it gets one or something similar in the starter deck that's coming out. And the less about Greymon, the better. It has so many value tamers in Marcuses, in ties, in Nokia even, and just different support down the line that's more than likely going to get support on top of the starter deck, on top of anything we see in BT14 Blast Ace, which is confirmed to be based on the original adventure. So fine, Cool Boy's broken, Greymon X is broken, who cares? What's the relevance? What's the point? The issue is how all of this relates back to the Ultimate Cup rules list, or bannings, and how it is essentially working as kind of a piece of duct tape on the current ban list issues. The Ultimate Cup rulings are structured in such a way that you cannot deviate from a singular color outside of dual-colored cards. So for example, if you have red eggs, every card in the deck must be red, whether it's just red, red-black, red-green, etc. This does not gel well with the current design of the Digimon card game as they've been building cards. A few examples of decks that took a big L during this are Diaboromon, which can only play the promo Diaboromon. The fact that no Omnimon is actually legal and playable for any deck in this format. That Cross Hearts, a marquee set that has been printed for the past 2 boosters and is getting support in the upcoming booster, is just completely unplayable as well. This has led to the domination of the format being by the decks that can most play into monocolors. Currently, 2 of the biggest contenders are Blue Flare, which really didn't lose much, just the Tri-Tamer, which wasn't that great anyway, as well as some shenanigans with starter deck Greymon and Metal Greymon X gaining extra security attack, and the biggest winner being Bloom Lordmon, which the deck was entirely green. It's lost some of its biggest competition in Black War Greymon, effectively taking a neuter, having to go down the fully black or fully red path, and just the fact that it hasn't really been touched at all. It's essentially just the same deck without any nerfs. This really isn't going to be a thing that's capable moving forward. A deck like Examon is outright unplayable. The Hunter's deck in BT12, which is 5 colors for some of the better builds, isn't playable. In BT13, Royal Knight Zoo just isn't playable. What's the game plan? What's the long term here? To just have different archetypes just not viable for your Ultimate Cup or other online events? Which is really kind of a smack in the face to certain players who can only make these style events. Not everybody in the US can get out to somewhere like California or Florida or Texas where some of these events are held. For them, these online events are the best way for them to play competitively outside of a locals, and just outright locking off certain decks is only a temporary solution that becomes less and less applicable the further we get away from BT11. Then there was also effectively the middle finger Bandai gave players by dropping these rulings in such close proximity to Ultimate Cup. This invalidated, in some cases, weeks or months of testing, having people maybe even having to drop their deck outright if they have been testing a deck that does not survive the changes of having to stay within the ranges of the 8 colors, or if they were in one of the decks that just outright saw bannings, or just even a player who might have gone out and bought a card like, say, Death Examon for anywhere between $50 and $70 just to be ready for the event. It's not a fully ethical business-making decision if you're selling tickets for an event on the predication that certain cards will be legal and then pulling the rug out from players right before it. If there have been certain benefits of the Ultimate Cup restrictions allowing different less powerful decks like, say, Galacticmon or Water Animals to have some contention or viability, it's undone by the culpability of these practices, dropping it as a surprise on your player base. Then when you look over at the more permanent ban list, you have some issues there as well, like the fact that the game is 2 years old, but we haven't seen a single card removed from it. There has already been arguments from players for the removal of a card like, say, Savior Huckmon or Tommy, who, while they dominated during their time in BT7, could come off. How strong is a 3-memory free Sistermon and a built-in unsuspend when other decks have similar tools? How strong is a 3-memory Tamer that's going to strip some sources when a card like X Antibody exists? Also looking at Tamer that doesn't actually give you any memory and can only stun things without sources, which once again gets checked by the existence of the X Antibody option. There's already better OTK decks in the format than peak BT6 and 7 Jesmon. There's already better stunning going on with Blue Flare compared to Blue Hybrid. These decks could make a comeback, and it would simply serve to diversify the meta rather than completely dominating it as they did in the past. Furthermore, there's the obsession with keeping extremely powerful cards at 1, the best example being Ice Wall. Ice Wall is not a well-designed card. It is too good. It does too much, being a hammer spark in security and effectively being a free floodgate to buy you a turn. The card needs to be at 0, and this is coming from someone who has played blue decks in the past. I have benefited from the card. I don't think it's good. I don't think it's healthy. I never feel good when I win off a one-of lucky Ice Wall in security, or drawing it at the right time and holding it just to secure my long-term chance at a win. We are not Yu-Gi-Oh! We are not a card game that is designed by the existence of powerful one-ofs that are allowed to be played. So why are we going to let a card like Ice Wall or Hidden Potential Discovered persist? It doesn't make sense. Or even with putting Greymon X to 1, just ban the card outright. If you're going to argue that it is too powerful to exist, then why are you going to limit it in a card game where you are inherently drawing more than other card games? You are bot decking on your searches, you can filter through your deck much faster. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Finally, I think we as players need to view how we look at ban lists differently. There's a lot of negativity, there's a lot of toxicity in ban lists and ban list periods. And there's a lot of people I've seen who have outright given up the game when their deck has taken a hit. A pretty good example being the Dora Greymon ban, completely running some Alpha Mon players out of the game, but now the deck's coming right back in BT13 as it got another Dora Greymon. This game is recursive. Losing a singular piece doesn't necessitate that your deck is going to be dead forever, and especially as we continue to revisit the same names and archetypes, it's more than likely that your deck could come back. And then in regards to toxicity, this is just not a healthy part of the community at all. Yes, there are people who are happy that Cool Boy wasn't banned. Yes, there are people who are really a little bit too happy that Greymon X got put to 1. But taking this to illogical extremes where you're being nasty to other people, especially in communities like the subreddit, YouTube comments, or Twitter, it's asinine. It's childish. Grow up. It's a card game. It's something that lives and dies on the existence of a community. And if you're making that community more negative, you're not going to create a foundation to bring in new players. It's just going to become more and more secular till it stops existing. I think moving forward, the best thing is to view our ban list periods more holistically, to adapt to them. And on the part of Bandai, maybe not making cards that are so pushed it's known in testing periods that they're going to be a problem. And more so not dropping something like an Ultimate Cup ban list in such close proximity to the event. That's not fair to player base. I don't think the metagame is in a bad place, and we've really only lived through 1 or 2 Tier 0 periods. There was BT1 when the game wasn't even really a full game, and then there was BT5 with Lord Nightmon. Moving past that, a lot of different decks are viable, a lot of different strategies can be taken to at least lower level events like an Ultimate Cup or Locals. For all the complaining, I don't think Black War Greymon X was ever a Tier 0 deck. It might have met the criteria for a couple of events as making up 50% more of the pod, but I think that's more circumstantial in the fact that some Digimon card game players are going to take what is colloquially known as the best deck. Kind of a false positive, if you will. But with all of this concluded, what are your thoughts? Do you like the ban list? And not just the Greymon X banning, but the whole thing in general. Is there a card you'd add? Is there a change you'd make? Maybe bring things to 2, or bring things to 3? What would you do to affect the Digimon card game? And how are you enjoying it? How are you enjoying this new Ultimate Cup format? Do you have any plans to play in any of the events? Have you seen any interesting spice at Locals? Please let us know in the comments below. And hey, if you're coming here and you aren't already subscribed to the channel, if you can do us a favor and subscribe, that would be awesome. We're on our road to 500 subs right now, and it's going to be great. As always, this is Tepper with Gordo's Games. Thank you for watching, and have a great day.